All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into an incredible ancient story about leadership, doubt, and a battle against absolutely impossible odds. So, let's really think about that for a second. What does happen? This very question is right at the heart of the story we're exploring today, drawn straight from the Quran.
Okay, so to really get this, you have to picture the scene. We're talking about the children of Israel sometime after the era of Moses, and things are, well, they're not great. They've been oppressed, scattered, and driven from their own homes.
So what do? They go to their prophet and they're practically begging. They say, look, just give us a king. We need a leader to unite us, and we swear if you do, we will fight for God.
Their prophet, though, he's a little skeptical. He sees their passion, sure, but he questions if it's going to last. He's basically asking them, are you guys really ready for this? Talk is cheap. Will you actually fight when the command is given?
So, their prayers are answered. But the king they get? Let's just say he was not at all who they were expecting. Their prophet makes the big announcement. God has appointed Talut, who you might know from other traditions as Saul, as your king.
And their reaction? It's immediate rejection. And you've got to hear their reasoning. They're basically saying, how can this guy be our king? We're way more worthy than him, and besides, he's not even rich.
And this is just a perfect breakdown of the whole problem, right? You see it right here. The people are focused on all the wrong things, royal bloodlines, money in the bank, but God's criteria? Completely different. It's about knowledge. It's about physical strength and stature, the things you actually need to lead an army.
So to get them past all this doubt, the prophet tells them, okay, you're not convinced? Well, you're about to get a sign, a miraculous sign that's going to prove Talut is the real deal.
And this wasn't just any old sign. This was the return of the legendary Ark of the Covenant, the Tabut. This sacred chest had been lost to them for a long, long time. Its return would be, well, undeniable proof.
And listen, this ark was a huge deal. It wasn't just an empty box. It was said to bring sakina, this profound sense of peace and tranquility straight from God. It held actual relics from the families of Moses and Aaron. And get this, it would be carried by angels. I mean, how much more of a sign do you need?
Okay, so Talut's leadership is finally confirmed. Time to march to war, right? Well, not so fast. First, his army has to face a crucial test of discipline.
So Talut lays out the test. He tells his soldiers they're coming to a river, and he gives them one simple command: do not drink. Well, okay, there's a tiny exception. You can take a single handful of water, but that's it. And what happens? The vast majority of them just completely ignore the order and drink as much as they want.
And boom. Just like that, this huge army shrinks down to just a small, faithful handful of men. Talut basically filtered out everyone who couldn't follow a simple instruction. The disobedient were left behind, because frankly, they weren't ready for what was coming next.
So this small, faithful group marches on. But when they finally lay eyes on the enemy, I mean, you can just imagine their shock. They see this giant, Jalut, that's Goliath, and his massive army. And for a moment, even some of these faithful guys start to lose hope. They're looking at the odds and saying, there's no way. We have no chance against them today.
But even in that moment of despair, the truly faithful step up. They remind everyone of a fundamental truth. They basically say, hey, how many times in history has a small group defeated a huge army with God's permission? Victory doesn't come from numbers. God is with those who are patient.
All right, now we get to the climax of the story. Let's see how this tiny band of believers faces this overwhelming enemy.
And as they're standing there on the brink of battle, what do? They don't draw up some complex military plan. They turn to prayer. They ask for patience, for their feet to be planted firmly on the ground, and for victory. They're grounding themselves spiritually.
And then it happens. The entire battle, this massive conflict, is decided by one person. A young, unexpected hero named Dawood, you know him as David, steps forward and takes down the giant Jalut.
And once the giant falls, the whole enemy army crumbles. The battle is won. And this single act of courage completely changes the course of history. It marks the rise of Dawood, who is then given kingship and wisdom, taught directly by God.
But the story doesn't just end there with the victory. It concludes with this really profound verse about why things like this even happen in the first place.
So here's the big idea to take away from this. The Quran frames this whole thing not just as a war, but as a kind of divine check and balance. The idea is that if God didn't have some people check the power of others, the world would just fall into corruption. These struggles serve a much higher purpose. Which brings us right back to that final, powerful question. When you're facing what feels like impossible odds, where does your strength really come from? Is it from wealth, from having a huge army? Or, as this story powerfully suggests, does it come from something else entirely?